So I just applied online, and when I came in for the interview, I was like, I will do anything to work here. I don't care what the job is, just put me to work. And they all kind of laughed. I interviewed with a lot of the executive team. It was mostly women and nurses, and I was like, oh, this is incredible.
Well, I guess so far, would you be able to go ahead and give, just start by sharing what exactly you do for Gifted Healthcare? Because I see that's like where you are right now. And I've also noticed that you were there for a while and you kind of have moved up in the company.
Yes, I joined Gifted Healthcare in 2015. I started out as the HR manager. I had worked for a couple years as an HR manager out of college, and I was really excited to jump into healthcare. It's something that I knew I was passionate about, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I joined Gifted after hearing about its culture from other people. So I was working with some nurses at my previous company that kept telling me, like, the one name that kept coming up was PK Shirley. She was the CEO at Gifted. And they kept saying she was so inspiring and amazing. She hosted all these nurse-centric events. And that just really appealed to me, that there was this culture that was surrounding nurses and supporting them. So I just applied online, and when I came in for the interview, I was like, I will do anything to work here. I don't care what the job is, just put me to work. And they all kind of laughed. I interviewed with a lot of the executive team. It was mostly women and nurses, and I was like, oh, this is incredible. So I started out as an HR manager. A few months after I started, my husband's job relocated us to Los Angeles, and I was really, really nervous that I'd have to find someplace else to work, but they allowed me to be our first remote employee. So I was the guinea pig for being remote.
Oh, wonderful.
But they switched my role. So I was a travel nurse recruiter. And before taking that position, I didn't even know what a travel nurse was. So that was really interesting. Gifted is a clinical staffing agency that places nurses primarily, but also support techs in a hospital environment and acute care facilities, long-term acute care facilities, correctionals. There's a whole variety of places that we place clinicians at. So I became a recruiter, and from that point, for about 2.5 years, I worked my way up to becoming a manager. And then in August of 2 years ago, I moved into a director role.
Wow. So I have actually a question, because my husband's also a nurse.
Yeah.
Where do you find your nurses? How do you recruit?
That's a great question. So it's a variety of places. The market has really shifted since I started. So 5 years ago, I would make 100 cold calls per day, and I would literally make like 500 calls in a week and just sit there and try to hit like the entire database of nurses who had ever applied with us or had ever expressed interest. So it was a lot of cold calling. It was a lot.
Cold calling is difficult.
So difficult. And so
Yeah.
that was the world in which I entered. But today it's a lot different because nurses use social media to connect with each other, and then also with job boards. So on Facebook, there's a bunch of like hidden job groups, and there are thousands of nurses in them, and recruiters join them and post jobs. So
Okay. So that's a whole lot easier than cold calling. Do you still have to cold call, or?
yeah, it's still effective, especially in local markets where we have smaller offices or we have a really great local presence. It's still great to make calls because a lot of the nurses there are aware of the brand and aware of who we are. So it's great to connect. And, there are a lot of people that still don't love technology. So you still have to talk to those.
Okay.
So not everyone's on social media. There's a lot of job boards that nurses can apply through, but still good old fashioned calling works occasionally.
Okay. Wow. So do you feel like you guys are moving more towards social media and using those type of platforms more, or is it kind of even, or?
I would say, so when I started, it was probably 80% cold calls, and now it's probably 20%. So the other 80% is probably now job boards, social media is number one. There's a website called Vivian that's where you post all your jobs. We get a lot of really great applicants through there. So the market is just completely different in such a short amount of time. I could have never guessed 5 years ago that it would change so much.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know technology has changed everything, especially like now. I never would have imagined we would have, like even at the university, gone completely online and started even using different platforms, not just Blackboard. So there's just so many things that we're starting to really open up our minds to right now, and remote working as well, and finding other ways to connect just using technology, you know,
It's
online. So it's pretty amazing. What challenges do you go through in your
it,
job?
in my job.
Yeah.
It's a constantly changing and evolving position because we have been having huge growth year over year. So when I started, I was one of maybe 5 recruiters, and now our team has about 35.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I personally manage 15 people, and there's 2 other directors on the team as well who also manage teams. So I would say probably the most challenging part about my job is staying ahead of the curve and really trying to be forward thinking, because as the industry continues to evolve, how do we become a leader in thought? And also, how do we stay ahead of all the new trends related to recruiting nurses? Maybe a year ago, we didn't use job boards as much, but now that's where nurses
Mhm.
are primarily applying through. And so catching those trends and really making sure we embrace them. So there's a lot of change in our industry constantly. It requires a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about wow, yeah, that's a lot. So like when you first started, were you was it somewhat of like a startup?
Yes. So it wasn't totally a startup. We're only, I
Okay.
think, 14 years old now as a company. So we're still newer.
Okay.
But when I
Seems like
started,
you grew tremendously.
yes, yeah, we grew a ton in the past few years. Our leadership has been amazing. They've added a few people onto the team that have made all the difference in terms of where we're going in our trajectory. So when I started, we were more of a local company. We did a lot of like local contracts, per diem staffing, and a little bit of travel. And my boss is the one that started up our travel division and really drove the business to new heights. She's been incredible. Yeah.
Okay. So it's your boss who had kind of the ideas about growth and everything like that. Do you guys use a lot of marketing?
Yes.
Um, so where do you guys market? Is it mostly online marketing, or do you, I mean, what other platforms or channels do you use?
We use mostly online. Our marketing team, I think when I started, we had like not even a full-time person, and now we have an insanely talented team. And I think that's made a big difference in how we reach nurses. So they handle all of our messaging, our
Mhm.
blogs. They do a lot of outreach for our nurses so they get to feel like they're part of the culture. We have a newsletter where we mention like our nurse of the month, and we just celebrate all the employees in a really
Okay.
global way. So I think that's made a huge difference.
Yeah, it would actually. Do you guys have ways that like you set yourself apart from other nurse recruiting agencies, like maybe reward nurses, or I don't know?
That is such a good question, because really all agencies, I always joke that most agencies offer the same jobs. We have a lot of overlap when it comes to what's available. But I
Mhm.
think the thing that makes us really different, and the thing that's made me stay for all this time, and I always joke that I want to retire with Gifted and I'm way too young to talk about retirement, is I think being nurse owned and nurse operated is a huge differentiator, because the
Okay.
people at the top, they care about the nurse experience. I've never once felt like I'm in a sales organization, or that numbers matter nearly as much as taking care of our people. And we have 2 chief nursing officers that are available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So if I have a nurse call me at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it happens more frequently than I, love, I can get them immediately on the phone with somebody who can understand what they're going through and who can speak nurse to them, and can also get in touch with whoever is in leadership at the hospital. And not every agency can offer, 24-hour care that way.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Are there particular hospitals that you guys work with? Or, I mean, I know there's a magnet program and things like that. Does that kind of influence like who you're willing to contract with, or?
We do a lot of vetting on who we work with, but we have a huge presence in Louisiana and Oklahoma. That's where 2 of our biggest offices are. So we work really locally in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette areas in Louisiana. And then in Oklahoma, we have an office in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. So we have huge presences there, but then also just nationally. I mean, even here in California, we've placed nurses
Mhm.
at UCLA, which always makes me happy when I get to like go say hi to nurses we placed here locally for me.
Oh, that's fun. Okay, okay, aside from the company,
Yeah.
yeah, so let's kind of get into just your career and the story of how you became or how you got here. So would you actually be able to tell us like from the beginning, like, or from the beginning of your healthcare related career to here?
So when I started in
Yeah.
healthcare, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. I was super confused. So when I started in HR, I thought that would be a good way to get to learn more about the industry as a whole and the different positions in the company, which it was
Mhm.
a really great introduction. It's been through having a really great manager that I think I've been able to develop my career as quickly as I have, because I feel super grateful that I'm in the role that I'm in now. I feel like I accelerated a lot faster than some of my peers because I've had a great mentor. Um,
Okay.
that has been maybe the biggest difference in my life.
Having a mentor.
Yeah, she's helped me grow professionally, but also personally. And those two things seem to go hand in hand with feeling, I don't know, more determined. Sorry, my dog is growling in the background. So I started at Gifted as as the HR manager, but then as I moved up in recruitment and became more focused on the things that I love in our one-on-ones, it was her directness that really helped me. You forget how important it is to tell employees the truth about their performance and what they're good at and what they
Mhm.
need to work on. And it was through really accepting critiques and taking everything to heart and implementing that in my work product that I feel like I've been able to move further along in my career.
Okay. What were some of the major stepping stones that you think help you get to that position? Like even prior to even getting to Gifted, why did they say yes to you?
I know. So
Yeah.
tenacity. I have that inner salesperson that if I really want something,
Okay.
like I'll be like, hey, you should hire me. Hey. After applying, I made sure that I wrote follow-up thank you notes to everybody. And I was very specific in my feedback about
Mm.
why I wanted to work for them, why I thought I'd be great at the position. When I got there, I made sure to make connections throughout the company. So I didn't just keep myself in a silo in my department. I was like the social butterfly. I'd go around the office, I would meet everybody, I would note what their favorite coffee was or little treats and make sure that everyone, like almost as if I was running for office, but not really. It was genuine. I wanted to get to know everybody at the organization. And it was through that that I felt like I made sort of lifelong connections. So even being remote now, it's really easy for me to pick up the phone and call payroll because they're like, oh, I remember Crazy Holly. She used to bring us cookies, So differentiating myself amongst, the staff was really helpful.
Okay. So do you think that actually helped you a lot with moving up within the company? Because to be honest, a lot of the people that I have spoken with have not really moved within the company. It's like if, they started at one healthcare organization doing something, and if they moved on with their career, they may go to another company and start something else over there. So like you're kind of unique in that way. Like you have really done something, I guess, something that like they always say you should. I
Yeah.
guess like as a more traditional route, like being loyal to your company and growing within the company and whatnot. You've really done that.
I
So,
It's surprising. I didn't think I would be able to do that in a short amount of time and with the same company. I
mhm.
don't think I really would have seen myself 6 years ago being at the same company for 6 years. I'd always thought that I would have to skip around to continue to move up, I guess the ladder, so to speak. But I think
Yeah.
that's been part of it is familiarizing myself with all the different departments too, because it's hard to be a director of recruitment and not understand what business development does on a cellular
Mhm.
level or what payroll does. And so really familiarizing myself, I used to call up different departments and say, hey, can we have a lunch and learn? I'll buy you lunch if you'll tell me more about what you do. So that way
Oh,
I could have,
okay.
I could eventually, be able to talk to them and effectively solve problems where they didn't have to be involved in everything. My job, my CEO once told me, she's like, your job is to make other people's job easier. And so I've always felt like that's a knowledge-based thing. If I understand what they do and how they do it, I can also help strategize solutions on problems that they come up with.
Wow, that's great. What got you interested in doing healthcare anyway?
So I love my grandparents. They're probably the two most important people in my life. And as they were getting a little bit older, I started to realize how important healthcare was. It was so central to almost every conversation we had, but it also was really central to them feeling better, them being well. And I realized how important those professionals were. It's crazy to think about the nurses that care for him. He's the most important person in my life. And so they have really precious cargo in their hands every time he goes to the hospital or to a doctor's visit. And it really inspired me to get involved in healthcare because it's such a meaningful profession. Everything we do greatly affects somebody that somebody else really loves. So
Right. Yeah, I agree to that. So, okay, you're a director. You're a director of recruitment. What made you decide to go and start to work on earning your MHA?
So I love the phrase, you don't know what you don't know. And I feel like there's still so much that I need to learn about the industry and the history of the industry in order to keep moving forward. Director is definitely not where I want to stop with my career. Someday I want to be in the C-suite, in the room where it happens,
Okay.
to quote Hamilton. So in order to do that, I feel like I need to have more knowledge on financial and strategic planning within healthcare organizations. And it's interesting coming at it from a staffing agency perspective because I'm not inside a hospital environment, but it's really cool to learn about that and use that and apply it to what we're doing too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, well, you just said eventually C-suite, but so what are your actual plans? Like, where do you think or where are you going to work on going from here?
So I want to continue learning as much as possible. I feel like I don't always know exactly where I'm going, but I know that if I try my hardest and put in 100% of my effort every day, that I'll eventually figure it out. Because even when I started as a recruiter, I had no idea I wanted to be a director of recruitment a few years later. So I feel like it'll all come to me in due time. I know I want to keep moving towards um, having more ability to chime in on strategy. That's one of my favorite parts of my job. So strategic planning makes me so excited. I'm a planner at heart. So I'm the kind of person that plans a vacation a year in advance. So I really, really love the idea of planning within a business. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you're always going to want to stick in like nurse recruitment, or are you going to go off into other, industries in healthcare?
I think that eventually I'll probably get out of like solely being in recruitment. Eventually, I'd like to really get into other aspects of the business. I'm interested
Mhm.
in a lot of different things related to public health. So there's definitely many different facets of healthcare that I'm intrigued by.
Yeah, well, you're on your way. I mean, yeah, going in for your MHA, that's pretty great. You're going to learn a lot. So, okay, lastly, I just want to ask you, what type of advice would you have for undergraduate students studying for their healthcare administration degree?
I think the best advice that I ever received is finding people in your industry that you admire and asking them to mentor you. I think that my mentors in my life have been some of the most pivotal people and have changed the course of everything else that I've ended up doing in the long term. So finding people that I can trust, that I can go to and ask for advice has been an amazing gift from people. And I think there are a lot of really successful people in our industry that would love to help because by the nature of healthcare, we just want to help people. So I think
Right.
that it's easy to find a mentor that will take you under their wing. And then also when I was job searching coming out of graduate or my undergraduate, the one thing I didn't really realize was how important it was to pursue a company that aligned with my values and the culture that I would really thrive in. Now that I've been in a company like that, it has helped me grow tremendously because I believe in the vision and where we're going as a company. So it puts a fire underneath me to do my best because I'm contributing to that overall picture.
I really agree with that, actually. Yeah, a company that aligns with your values and your vision and like just who you are,
Yeah.
really. That's so important. And the thing is, I know that it's not always the first priority when you are job searching because when you're a new graduate, and especially if you got, I don't know, rejected a few times with a few jobs that you may have applied for, you're really just trying to get something.
Yeah.
So that is actually very important advice, because the thing is, I know that my first job in healthcare administration sucked. It was bad. I hated being there so much. Yeah, every day was misery. So that's all I have to say about that. So that's very important advice. Anyway, Holly, thank you so much for doing this and for joining me and sharing some of your wisdom with me and our students. If anyone wants to maybe ask you questions or contact you or get any advice, or who knows, maybe they want to be recruited.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can they contact you?
Email is always best. My email address is hperry@giftedhealthcare.com. And I can send that to you too so that you have it. But that's usually the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.